You wake up and the first thing you do is check how many people saw your story. Before coffee, before consciousness, before you've remembered who you are beneath the performance, you're already counting, measuring, calculating whether yesterday's joy registered correctly on the platform's metric of authentic human experience. This isn't vanity. This is labor. You've been conscripted into the most sophisticated production system ever devised, the mass manufacture of happiness as content. Somewhere between the rise of social media and the transformation of every human experience into potential brand material, joy stopped being a feeling and became a responsibility. Not just to feel it, but to demonstrate it, to perform it with sufficient enthusiasm that others believe it, to optimize its presentation so it generates the correct emotional response in your audience. And you have an audience now. That's not optional. Your friends are your audience. Your family is your audience. Potential employers scroll through your happiness, evaluating its authenticity, its consistency, its alignment with company values. There was a time when happiness was private. A sunset experienced alone was still a sunset. A meal shared with one person was still shared. But that economy has collapsed. Now the unphotographed moment generates a specific anxiety. Did it happen if no one saw it? More precisely, do you exist if your joy isn't visible? This visibility isn't neutral documentation. It's curated performance. You take 17 photos to find the one where your smile looks effortless. You write and rewrite the caption until it sounds spontaneous. You wait for the optimal posting time, when your joy will receive maximum validation. What they call sharing, you experience as reporting. You're filing happiness paperwork with an invisible bureaucracy that's always evaluating, always comparing, always finding you slightly insufficient. The platforms didn't create this system by accident. They engineered it with precision. Every feature is designed to convert your contentment into craving. The like counter that shows you're appreciated, but never quite enough. The algorithm that occasionally withholds your content, training you to produce more, perform better, optimize harder. You post your happiness and wait. The validation arrives in small, unpredictable doses, the same neurological pattern that makes slot machines addictive. 5 likes, 20 likes, sometimes 200. You never know which performance will succeed, so you keep performing. But here's what the system requires you to never recognize. This isn't a game you're losing. It's a game designed to be unwinnable. The inadequacy you feel isn't personal failure. It's the system functioning exactly as intended. Because a satisfied person stops producing. A content person stops consuming. Your happiness, when real, when sufficient, when complete, is a threat to an economic model that requires your perpetual dissatisfaction. So they've made joy into labor. And like all labor under capitalism, it must never be finished. There's always another moment to capture, another experience to optimize, another version of happiness to perform. There's a specific kind of tired that comes from being happy on schedule. Not the tiredness of work, though it is work. Not the fatigue of physical effort, though your body feels it. This is the depletion that comes from sustaining an emotional performance that has no intermission, no backstage, no moment when you're allowed to simply exist without an audience evaluating your existence. You feel it most acutely in those moments when you're actually experiencing something pleasant. A beautiful view, a good meal, a moment of genuine connection. And immediately, before you've even finished feeling it, the secondary task activates. How do I show this? How do I prove I'm having the experience I'm having? How do I translate this private sensation in a public currency? The split happens so quickly you barely notice it anymore. You're there and not there, present and performing. The experience divides into the thing itself and the demonstration of the thing, and increasingly you're not sure which one matters more, or whether the thing itself still exists once it's been optimized for display. This isn't overthinking. This is accurate perception of what the system requires. That your joy become legible, measurable, comparable. That it generate data. That it contribute to the grand aggregation of human happiness that platforms use to prove their value to advertisers. They've made authenticity into the most demanding performance of all. Be yourself, they say, but they mean be the version of yourself that generates engagement. Be the self that's relatable but aspirational, vulnerable but not too vulnerable, real but optimized. You're producing content about your life while living your life, and the production has become indistinguishable from the living. The breakfast that's photographed before it's tasted. The vacation that's experienced through the camera roll you're already imagining showing others. The relationship that's partly maintained for the way it appears to those watching. And you know this is happening. You're not deceived, but the knowledge doesn't free you because the system doesn't run on deception. It runs on compulsion. You know the performance is exhausting, and you cannot stop performing because the non-performer becomes invisible, and invisibility in this economy equals non-existence. The platforms have discovered what traditional capitalism never quite managed: how to make you exploit yourself, how to make you the worker and the product simultaneously, how to extract value from the most intimate dimensions of your life while making you believe you're simply sharing, connecting, being human. But here's what they need you to never recognize. The exhaustion you feel isn't personal weakness. It's not that you lack resilience or discipline or proper self-care habits. The exhaustion is structural. It's the natural response to a system that demands infinite emotional labor and calls it authentic self-expression. Your tiredness is data. It's information about what this system costs. And when you stop pathologizing your own fatigue, you begin to see something they'd prefer remained invisible: the system itself. Nobody set you down and explained the rules. Nobody handed you a contract stipulating that your happiness would be measured against the happiness of everyone you've ever known, plus thousands of strangers whose curated joy scrolls past your eyes 40 times before breakfast. Yet here you are, competing in a tournament you never signed up for, losing to people who aren't even aware you exist. This is the genius of the system. Traditional competition required explicit structure. Winners and losers were declared. Finish lines existed. But the new apparatus operates through ambient comparison. Your friend's vacation doesn't explicitly diminish your own. Her promotion doesn't technically cancel your achievements. His relationship doesn't formally invalidate yours. Yet you feel the subtraction. The quiet erosion of your contentment in the presence of someone else's displayed satisfaction. They've gamified existence itself. And the most sophisticated aspect of this game is that it pretends not to be a game at all. It calls itself connection, community, sharing. The violence is linguistic before it becomes psychological. They've taken the vocabulary of human intimacy and repurposed it as the infrastructure of competitive self-display. You know this. Consciously, you understand that the happiness you're seeing is edited, filtered, strategically revealed. But the knowledge doesn't inoculate you against the feeling, because the system doesn't operate at the level of rational understanding. It functions in the gap between what you know and what you feel. That gap is where the exhaustion lives. Here's what they've accomplished that previous systems of control never quite managed. They made you diagnose yourself. When you feel tired of performing, you don't blame the demand for performance. You blame your insufficient resilience. When you feel inadequate in the face of others' displayed achievements, you don't question the display apparatus. You question your own worth. This is the infrastructure of what they call wellness. The endless tutorials on self-care that never mention the self wouldn't need quite so much care if it weren't being systematically depleted. The productivity advice that promises to help you accomplish more without ever asking whether more is the correct direction. The happiness industry that sells you techniques for feeling better about conditions that shouldn't exist. Your body knows something your mind has been trained to ignore. That feeling of resistance when you reach for your phone to document a moment you're currently living, that's not antisocial behavior. That's accurate perception. That reluctance to update everyone on your emotional state, not depression, sanity. The system requires your constant participation to extract value from your existence. And it has made that participation feel like choice, like self-expression, like the natural behavior of a person who wants to connect with others. But connection doesn't require constant broadcasting. Community doesn't demand perpetual visibility. What demands these things is an economic model that converts your interiority into data and your relationships into markets. The exhaustion isn't personal failure. It's structural violence. And recognizing that difference is the beginning of something they cannot commodify: refusal. There's a word they've almost erased from acceptable vocabulary: withdrawal. Not as pathology, not as antisocial deficiency, but as legitimate response. As accurate reading of conditions that demand too much. As the intelligent refusal of a system that requires your constant availability to function. You feel guilty when you don't respond immediately. When you leave messages unread. When you let days pass without updating your status. Without proving you're still producing happiness at the required rate. That guilt isn't organic. It's been installed, carefully cultivated by platforms that need your perpetual presence to extract value from your existence. But what if that impulse to vanish isn't weakness? What if it's your body's correct assessment that something is demanding more than it should? That the request for constant visibility isn't a reasonable feature of human community, but an economic requirement disguised as social obligation? They've made disappearance feel like failure. But in a system that requires your constant performance to survive, your absence becomes the most radical act available. Not permanent exit, not complete refusal, simply the practice of sometimes not being available for extraction. Imagine experiencing something without immediately converting it into content. A conversation that exists only between the people having it. A realization that stays private. A feeling that doesn't require external validation to confirm happened. This sounds simple. It isn't, because they've trained you to believe that the undocumented experience is wasted. That joy without audience is somehow diminished. That your life gains legitimacy only through the quantity of witnesses you can provide. But here's the truth they need you to never discover. The monitored life and the lived life are becoming opposites. The more you perform existence, the less you experience it. The gap between living and displaying widens until you're not sure which one you're doing anymore. Your happiness, when real, doesn't require proof. It doesn't need measurement or comparison. It exists whether or not anyone sees it. And the moment you fully understand this, something breaks in the system's hold over you. This isn't a call to delete everything and retreat. The system has learned to commodify that too, selling you expensive minimalism and curated disconnection. This is something simpler and more threatening. The practice of sometimes choosing reality over its representation. Of letting moments pass unrecorded. Of keeping certain joys private. Of existing, occasionally, without needing to prove that existence to an audience that's simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. They'll call this antisocial, ungrateful, a waste of opportunity. Because your withdrawal represents loss. Not your loss. Theirs. Every moment you're not performing is a moment they cannot extract value from. Every experience you don't convert into content is revenue they cannot capture. Your exhaustion was never personal failure. It was accurate perception. And your refusal, when it comes, won't be escape. It will be the most precise form of resistance available. The reclamation of life from its representation. The recovery of joy from its job description. The quiet insistence that you exist whether or not anyone is watching.